Всем привет! Greetings and salutations. In this episode of City Segments, we'll be visiting Kaliningrad, a city about 1,000 kilometers west of Moscow. Kaliningrad has around 450,000 residents and is the capital city of the Kaliningrad region, the westernmost region of Russia. The Kaliningrad region is an exclave, meaning that it is completely separated from the rest of mainland Russia. It is surrounded by the Baltic Sea, Lithuania and Poland. To understand why Russia has a small chunk of land surrounded by other countries, we need to look back to 1945. The territory then was called East Prussia and was part of Nazi Germany. Once the war had ended and the victors were dividing Germany into smaller fragments, East Prussia was split between the Soviet Union and Poland. The modern-day city of Kaliningrad was founded as Königsberg in 1255 by the Teutonic Knights, near the site of an old Prussian settlement called Twangster. As with many European cities, Kaliningrad has had many different names as it changed owners over the course of the years, and it was renamed for the last time in 1946 in honor of Soviet bigwig Mikhail Kalinin. Unfortunately, heavy bombing in the later years of the Second World War destroyed almost all the older parts of Kaliningrad, and when our friends the Soviets took over, their infamous panelled housing blocks soon popped up all over the city. I'll take you on a quick journey through this curious part of the world that is an interesting mix of the good, the bad and the downright ugly. Our journey starts on Kant's Island. Yes, you heard that right. Kant's Island, named after the famous German philosopher Immanuel Kant. Mine's out of the gutter, please. The island used to be called Knipehof, and this district was one of the 3 original towns within the city of Königsberg when it was still under Teutonic rule, and it was one of the most important parts of the city. Almost all of the island is now a large park, with the Königsberg Cathedral being the only remaining historical structure present. During the bombing and siege, the cathedral was reduced to nothing more than a shell, but was restored in the 90s to reflect how it looked before the war. The main part of the cathedral now serves as a concert hall, and there is also a small church, a museum and of course a gift shop. You can find the final resting place of good old Kant, don't be foul, at the back of the cathedral where a mausoleum was built in 1924 to mark 200 years since his birth. This little island is also the origin of the mathematical problem called the 7 Bridges of Königsberg. In essence, the problem arose when someone with too much time on his hands thought about the 7 bridges that connected Knipehof, another small island, and the rest of the city. The problem was to figure out how to walk through all parts of the city, islands included, and cross each bridge exactly once. The problem, which was declared to have no solution, is said to have laid the foundations of graph theory, and thus the subsequent suffering of students worldwide in the centuries to come. And as an added bonus, it is said that he never even visited the city himself. For the maths wizards who are champing at the bit with excitement, I've put a link to the Wikipedia page about the problem in the description below. We're now moving on to Fort Friedrichsburg, or rather, the only remaining part of the original fort, which are the gates. The construction of the fort began in 1657 and was added to the Königsberg fortification ring that surrounded the city. The position of the fort meant it was able to defend the city from the west, monitor ship traffic on the river, and, I quote, suppress civil uprising. How very convenient. In 1910, the fort was sold and dismantled to make way for railway tracks, with only the gates remaining, which now house a small museum. Another remnant of the fortification ring is the King's Gate, which was built in 1765 in the northeastern part of the city. The gate is now also a museum, and it has exhibits about apothecary through the ages, the history of Prussia, the origins of the city, and various important people who played significant historical roles. The 3 statues on the western facade of the gate depict King Ottokar II, Friedrich I, and Albrecht of Prussia, all important figures in the history of the city. The gate was quite badly damaged in the Second World War, and Soviet soldiers decapitated the statues to celebrate the city's capture. Up until 2005, the gate was still in a sorry state of affairs, but was quickly renovated and restored in time for the city's 750th anniversary celebrations. We're now visiting the World Ocean Museum. The museum is spread over a few locations near the river, and in fact Fort Friedrichsburg as well as the King's Gate are also managed by the museum. The museum has quite a few interesting locations, such as a retired Soviet submarine that you can explore to get a glimpse of what life is like in the depths. Of course, any old fool would realize that space was limited, but just how cramped everything actually is only really becomes clear when you're scrambling around inside while narrowly squeezing through doorways, ducking your head under pipes, and avoiding hot, electrified or moving parts. I think the fact that a human mind is able to remember the placement and layout of the piping, gauges, valves and the whole assortment of various knobs and buttons is a small wonder in itself. Even if you're not claustrophobic, this tiny space would definitely take some time to get used to. Next we have the research vessel Vitязь. This ship, like Kaliningrad, has quite a complicated history of ownership. The ship was built in 1939 as a cargo and passenger ship in Germany. During World War II, it was converted into a military hospital, and it also evacuated around 20,000 Germans from the area in the later stages of the war. Once the war had ended, the ship was handed over to Great Britain. A year after that, it was then given to the Soviet Union, but it was simply moored in St. Petersburg as a so-called trophy ship. The ship was then chosen as the ideal vessel to be converted into a research ship and was extensively renovated in at least 5 different cities around the world to prepare it for its new life. The ship was fitted with 14 laboratories and had an anchor chain that was 11 kilometers in length. During its research lifetime, the ship traveled more than 800,000 nautical miles and engaged in all kinds of scientific research, including measuring the depth of the Mariana Trench. These scientific endeavors and expeditions helped to identify more than 1,000 new species of plants and animals. The ship was retired in the late 70s and was transformed into a museum in the 90s. There are many other parts to the museum, such as this hollowed out ball thing which has been installed to demonstrate how sound travels in water. You can press different buttons to hear what it's like to live in a pineapple under the sea. Got the song stuck in your head? The pleasure's all yours. There are also many other buildings that are part of the museum that host a massive array of exhibits, but trying to squeeze all of it in one visit is just not possible. Throughout the video you've probably noticed this thing. It is an unfinished, brutalist beast that is called the House of the Soviets, but locals refer to it as the buried robot, as it looks like the head of a giant robot poking out of the ground, something that you can't really unsee. The construction of this monstrosity began in 1970 and was supposed to be the central administration of Kaliningrad, but there were issues such as unstable foundations, cracks in the concrete, and ultimately, surprise surprise, a lack of funding. The building's fate was sealed in November 2020 with demolition planned for February-March 2021, but so far, it's still there. New plans have been put forward to turn the area into a central business district in a style that would imitate the historical appearance of the city and the castle that once stood there, and the plans include offices, hotels, cafes, parks, restaurants, and all the essentials of a modern global city. Some of the waterfront properties have already been completely overhauled and turned into luxurious apartment blocks and hotels, and all over the city you can see that improvement seems to be a high priority. Kaliningrad is a very interesting and unexpected destination on the map of Russia, and there are plenty of other interesting things to see and do, and I think a return trip at some point is definitely in order. I hope you enjoyed visiting the city with me, and don't forget to check out my drone footage of the city to see a bit more of what it has to offer. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Make sure that you click on the bell if you want to be notified of any new videos that I upload. See you next time.